and I'm excited about what's coming up. That creative night looks awesome. Benji, I really want to lead worship. Can I come to that? Can I?
No.
Oh, okay, cool. Well, I hope Benji doesn't judge you like he just judged me. Listen, nobody wins when I lead worship. That God's like, you know what, I'm out. I can't do this. So nobody wins, but man, I'm excited about what we have going on here at Eikon, excited about what's coming up. But I need to do something. We need to do a little experiment. Can you guys help me out with a little experiment? Can you guys do that? Cool, 3 of you. Okay, the rest of us, okay, we all need to do this, okay? We all need to participate together in this little experiment. I want you to imagine something, okay? I want you to picture in your head someone, okay? So think of a person that you want to be more like, someone that you want to emulate. Maybe it's someone you respect, someone you look up to. Could be a business person, the way they run their business, you just really respect. They've earned a lot of wealth for them and their family, or maybe it's someone who's an athlete. Maybe you desire to be an athlete in some way, and or someone that you know that's in great shape, and you want to, be in that. Or maybe it's like someone that you look up to spiritually, someone you respect spiritually, and you're like, I want to be like them, and you're thinking of them. So I want you to picture that person in your head. Maybe for you want to be more like your parents. You have a lot of respect for your parents. You want to be more like them. I know that was the case for my daughter in first service, Elena. Like as soon as I said this, she was like, oh, clearly my father. And she's not here to refute that. But anyway, so I want you to picture that person in your head, okay? Picture them in your head, okay? And think about who they are, and then I want you to picture where they are and where you are right now, okay? I want you to picture that. Now, I don't know about you, but when I do that, I feel this tension between where I am and where they are. Anybody else? Like I'm just not there. You feel like you're so far away. You're so far from that. And I've got a question for you about that person. What's different about them? What's different about them that they've been able to achieve that which you only strive to attain? What sets them apart? What makes them different from anyone else that you chose that person? What's different about them? Because here's what we can often do in our minds. When we think of that person, and then when we think of where we are, we like to give ourselves an out. We say, well, they had kind of a leg up on the competition. If it's a business person, we might think, well, their connections really set them up. If it's an athlete or someone, you might think, well, they've got great genetics, and you like to kind of give yourself excuses. They came from the, right side of the tracks, the right family, and I didn't have that. And we like to kind of give ourselves a break, and we feel like it's unattainable to get there. And the reason I'm having you pick someone else is really this is about who you want to become. Who is it that you desire to be? And in this kind of new year, oftentimes this is what we do. We think about who I want to be at the end of this year. But sometimes it's easier to kind of put it on another person. So in thinking about that person, I've actually got some good news and some bad news for you. The good news is, and this really is some good news, and I want you to hear this. The good news is that person has learned that success comes as a byproduct of work. That there's nothing inherently about that person that gave them a leg up. And here's the thing, I get it. There are things like genetics and connections that do go into play, but by and large, for the most part, the person's realized that success comes as a byproduct of work. At the same time, if I desire to, be a, NBA athlete, I'm never going to be able to, no matter how hard I try, make it there. Listen, I'm not LeBron. I get it. I know some of you are confused and might think that might be the case, but that's just never going to happen, right? But at the same time, though he was born with some advantages, he didn't wake up just dunking a basketball. Maybe LeBron did, but there's other players that didn't just wake up. No, they worked hard for those things. They realized that success comes as a byproduct of working hard, and they woke up and they worked hard. But I've also got some bad news for you, because though they just, realized that it comes as a byproduct of work, that person also, the bad news is the person learned that success comes as a byproduct of work. Right? It's just going to require some work. And that's bad news. Because what we want it to come a little bit easier than that. We want things to just kind of fall into place and to work out perfectly. But oftentimes, I'd argue all the time, we've got to work for it. It's going to take something on our part. In fact, in thinking about kind of where you are today and where you want to be, the only difference between who you are today and who you'll be tomorrow are the choices you make between now and then. It's the only difference. It's the choices you actively choose to make. So as you look forward to the end of this year, you look forward to someday, I want to be more like this person. I want to emulate this person's life. The only difference between you then and you now are the choices that you're going to make. It's just going to come down to the brutal choice of your will. And this is so simple, yet so important. This is why we're doing this series called Small Things, Big Difference, because it's these small choices that we make. In fact, if you weren't here last week, you missed out on an amazing message. Steve spoke. If you missed it, you've got to check it out for so many reasons. One, the message was great, but there was also an amazing story that Steve told that you have to listen to. So if you missed it, just for the story, just listen to the story and then you can check out. No, it was a great message as he talked about having words to live by. And he really set up this series and he said, this is kind of the giveaway for the whole series. So I'm gonna go back to what Steve said. The key for this series is that it's the small things that no one sees that result in the big things that everyone wants. It's the small things that nobody is ever gonna see that result in the big things that all of us want. See, that's the whole idea between small things, big difference. And this point is illustrated in a great book called The Power of Habit. Has anybody read The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg? Great, incredible book. I hope my staff raised their hand because I made them read it. So good job, staff. But this is an incredible book, and it talks about how habits are formed and how we adjust our habits and learning what cues our habits and how habits work. So first person to raise their hand, who wants the book? Okay, I saw a hand right there. Yes, that's right. So go ahead and run down and I'd throw the book, but somebody get popped in the face. So nobody wins when they get hit in the face. There you go. It's an incredible book. And there's this premise in this book that I want to highlight. It was probably my favorite part of the book. If I could take one thing out of the book, my favorite part was where he talked about something called a keystone habit. Now, what a keystone habit is it's a small habit oftentimes that leads to really big results. And how you help identify keystone habits is the result that you would expect from that habit is much smaller than the result that you actually get when you implement it. And he gave a few different examples, and they did all these studies. It's backed up by research, great book. And so one of the keystone habits that they identified is something that we all love to do, and it's actually flossing. Now, be honest, how many of you in this room, every single morning you floss? Raise your hand. Raise your hand. 1, 2, 3-ish. Okay, so the three people here are looking around disgusted at everyone else, thinking like you, like absolute barbarians, don't floss, right? So as they judge the rest of us who don't floss every day, and here's why they identified flossing as a keystone habit. And it's so weird. You would expect, like when you floss, the benefit would be healthier gums, healthier teeth, right? And that would be the benefit that you would get from that habit. Well, he illustrates this and he says there's actually much more positive things that come when you start your morning off and every morning you floss. I talked to someone after service and they said that they learned this trait and they were told, listen, win the morning, win the day. And that's kind of how this principle works, that you wake up in the morning and there's something that none of us want to do. Like you don't wake up and you go, oh, I can't wait to floss. Like, oh, I've been waiting all night and now I was dreaming of flossing and now I get, no. You wake up and that's the last thing you want to do, right? But you do it anyway. You get up, you go into the bathroom and say, I'm going to floss. And you sit there and floss. And I'd walk through the particulars on how to floss, but I'll leave that out because I don't floss, right? So you're flossing, right? And then you're done flossing. And then you feel like a disciplined person because you just did something that you didn't really want to do, but you decided this is important. You woke up and you decided today I'm going to floss. And then you go to work and usually you come in a little late, but today you're disciplined. You feel great. You just flossed. So you come into work early and usually you jump on Facebook first, right? To like a few things and to see how many comments you got, right? But you decide, no, today you floss. So you're going to work hard and you're a disciplined person. You go to work and you work extra hard that day and you turn in report after report and your boss notices and they go, wow, there's something different about you. Your teeth look great, but man, you are disciplined, right? And what does your boss do? He gives you a bonus, right? He gives you a raise and a promotion, and then you get like a 20% raise because you flossed, remember? Right? And you're feeling so disciplined. You go home, you tell your wife, you say, honey, you know what? You can pursue your career of being an author. You've always wanted to be a full-time author, so you go for it. And of course, your wife's amazing. So she writes a New York Times bestseller, makes millions of dollars, goes into film and movies and makes millions of dollars, but then finds that unfulfilling. So she goes into politics and she becomes the next president of the United States of America because you flossed, right? Like that's how, I think that's in the book, right? That's chapter 4, I think, right? And maybe not that extreme, but the basic premise is true, that when you win the morning, you actually end up winning the day. That if you wake up and you do something that is going to require some discipline of you, that you're gonna go out there and you're gonna go after the day with more discipline, that's a keystone habit, that one habit builds on another habit and builds on another habit. And it builds on this principle that we are what we repeatedly do. We are what we repeatedly do. You are what you repeatedly do. So I've got a question for you. I want to ask you, how many of you here would consider yourself a really, just kind of naturally, you're a pretty disciplined person? Raise your hand. You don't be shy. You're a pretty disciplined person. Yeah, good number of you. Okay, how many of you kind of naturally, you are not a very disciplined person? Yes, a much larger crowd, and there are some people that are so undisciplined they didn't even raise their hand, right? They're just like, "Nyeh," and that's just kind of how they go about life, right? It's like, "Nyeh." Right? You just don't have, I also saw some like spouses raising hands of each other. That's the next series on relationships. We'll get to that. But right, so for those of you who aren't very disciplined, I heard this story recently, and it really made a lot of sense to me, because at first I like to think of things in terms like that, like disciplined and not disciplined. But this guy, he was a personal trainer, and he met a client, and he told his client that he doesn't believe that anyone is undisciplined. He said, everyone has discipline. And this client says, well, clearly you don't know me, right? Because I have no discipline. I overeat, I sleep in every single day, I'm late to work all the time, I'm late everywhere. I play video games constantly. Like, I am so undisciplined, I don't even know where to start. And the trainer disagreed. He's like, I'm sorry. Like, no, every person is disciplined. And they started going back and forth, and the trainer just stood his ground. He said, no, you don't get it. And the client sat there for a while. He goes, okay. If everyone has discipline, you know what? I am extremely disciplined when it comes to hitting that snooze button. Like, I got that. Okay, so yes, I hit the snooze button all the time. And you know what? Come to think of it, when it comes to video games, I've got like discipline on the lockdown. Like, I play every single night with discipline. And come to think of it, I don't think I've ever skipped a meal in my life. Like, once. I will never pass on food. I have so much discipline. And he was kind of getting it, that this is this truth about us. Really, we are all disciplined in certain things. We are. Every single one of us have discipline in certain things. Sometimes it's just the wrong things, right? Like, we've all got discipline, but sometimes it's just in the wrong things. Which brings me to this couch, right? Because some of us are disciplined in some things like relaxing. Some of us are disciplined in, you are disciplined when it comes to binging on Netflix, right? If that was an Olympic sport, you could lock that down, right? Like, I've got that one. Binging on Netflix, got it. Name the show, I've put it away, right? And we've got discipline. Sometimes it's just in the wrong things. So what we do oftentimes at the beginning of the year, or what we do when we find ourselves at a place and I'm here and who I want to be, where I want to be, the person I want to be like is all the way over here. We feel this tension and we think, I know what it is. I need some stuff, right? Like, I need to get off this couch, because what I like to do is sit on this couch, and I like to relax, and I like to take it easy, and that's what I like to do. So what I need something else. I need something else to sit on, and you realize, like, I saw a coworker with this, and what you do is you buy one of these giant bouncy ball things, right? And you're like, at work, I'm gonna sit on one of these things, and now I'm healthy, right? And you're sitting on one of these, or you think you're better than us, you get a stand-up desk. Steve has a stand-up desk, that's why I mock him, right? And you're like, I'm gonna be healthy, right? And so you get this like bouncy ball thing, and you got like, so you're healthy now, right? And you think like, that's good, but that's not quite enough, right? Like, at work, sure, my coworkers think I'm healthy, so that's the biggest thing. But other than that, like, I still wanna get over here, so this isn't quite enough. So you think like, I need more stuff. So you're like, you know what? I'll do yoga. I know doing yogi stuff is really important. You're like, I'll start doing yoga. Or you watch maybe on Facebook, you see a Facebook ad for P90X. Has anybody ever done P90X? Right? Me too. I hate it as well. Tony Horton's jokes get really lame after a while, right? So you do P90X and you get everything, right? You get the push-up stand things, because you're going to do push-ups and stuff, right? Like, you're like, I'm gonna because doing normal push-ups are lame. I need power stands, right? And you get the real stuff. And then you decide you're gonna get some of these medicine ball things, right? Because this is good stuff, right? And have you ever, those of you who've done P90X or seen it, there's one that like Tony Horton, who's like 80 and looks like he's like, I don't know, 20, does push-ups with his hands on these things. And then he'll take this and put his feet on this while his hands are on that and do push-ups on that. I kid you not, it's some sort of black magic. How many of you guys want to see me give it a try? No, you guys are sick because you know I would fail horribly and you want to see me break my nose on stage. Like no one thought like, ooh, I'd be so impressed if Dan did that. No, it was like, I want to see Dan fail. That's all you wanted out of that. I hate you. Thank you so much for my self-esteem. Or you think like, you watch CrossFit, so you're going to do like kettlebell stuff and you're going to jump ropes and be all CrossFit. And you know who does CrossFit, don't you? You don't have to wonder, they'll tell you, right? So you're like, I'm gonna like all this, and you get all this stuff, and you're like, this is why I'm not over here. I don't have the right stuff. I just need more stuff. And you realize like, oh, I wanna be healthy, I wanna run. I know what my problem is. I've got the wrong shoes to run, right? Like clearly that's why I'm not running. I just need different shoes, right? And all of you, don't you? You go buy running shoes thinking this is gonna solve it, right? Like once I've got my running shoes on, I just feel like running, right? And you're like, I'm gonna run now, but it's cold, so maybe not now. Like maybe we'll run later, but I've got the shoes. In fact, did you know that 87% of Americans own running shoes but don't run? 87% of Americans have running shoes and don't run at all, unless it's like to the fridge, right? Like it's just like, I'll run there, I'll run if someone chases me, but I don't do running, right? And we think sometimes like, if I just had the right stuff, then I'd have it, right? Then I'd be able to make these kinds of decisions. And we think that like discipline comes down to that, just having the right tools around us. But can we be honest? I mean, this statistic right here is an illustration of the fact that our problem is we don't have enough tools. That's not our problem. So our problem is we don't understand the right kind of discipline. We don't understand discipline in the right way. What true discipline is discipline is choosing between what you want now and what you want most. It's because you know what I want now? What I want now is to see if there's another donut out there. Like that's what I want now. But what I want most is not somebody that keeps going for the donuts. Or you might think what I want most is to live debt free. And that means when you're in Target or you're at the outlet malls or you're at the store, at what you want right then, you decide, you know what, I'm gonna sacrifice what I want now for what I want most to live debt free. You realize when you feel hurt or offended by your spouse, what you want most is a healthy marriage, but what you want now is to get even. See, discipline is choosing between what you want right now and what you want most. Saying it's not about enough tools. It's not about I've got shoes now and I don't have the push-up stands and that's why I can't be like Tony Horton. That's why. And it's not about the stuff. It's about our choices. It's about our actions. See, actions are the small things that make a really big difference over time. And so the question is, like, how do we get this kind of discipline? How do we incorporate this kind of discipline into our lives? And what I love is because there's this tension that we feel that we start off good and then maybe we fall, or we get these good intentions and we don't follow through. How do you get past that? What I love is there's a guy named Paul in the Bible. In fact, he's written almost over half the New Testament, and he writes these different letters. And man, if anybody's kind of a super Christian, it'd be this guy. I mean, he's writing parts of the Bible. He's writing letters. He's planting churches. He's traveling all across the known world, telling people about who Jesus is. And I want you to look at what Paul says in one of his letters. Here's what he says. I don't really understand myself, for I want to do what is right, but I don't do it. Instead, I do what I hate. Anybody been there? Right? This is like Paul in like February or March of New Year's resolutions, right? Like it's like, man, I want to do this, but I don't. And he goes on, he says this, I want to do what is right, but I can't. I want to do what is good, but I don't. I don't want to do what is wrong, but I do it anyway. I love it that this is in our Bible. That it's not glazed over and that he's this perfect person. No, he's saying, I mess up all the time. Why is that? And then he comes to this conclusion. And I want you to just wait. Before you jump on and grab onto this, I want to explain a couple things. So here's what he says a little bit later. He says, but if I do what I don't want to do, I am not really the one doing wrong. It is a sin living in me that does it. And most Christians go, yes. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's not me, it's the devil. It's the sin that made me. That's why I was sorry. I'm not a jerk. The sin in me is a jerk, right? Like I'm not fat and lazy. It's that pesky sin, right? And we want to blame it on something else, and we want to go, and that's not what Paul is getting at here. He's not saying, hey, find a scapegoat. Oh, it's just the sin in me that's doing it. I'm not really the one doing wrong. What he's doing is he's illustrating an idea that he and Jesus both talk about when they talk about this idea of sin. Sometimes we think of sin as like bad things that we do, that a problem that needs to be solved. But what Jesus talks about as sin is less a problem to be solved and more a sickness to be cured. It's like there's this sickness inside of everything, inside of every one of us that is keeping us from being who God created us to be, perfect image bearers of him. Yet we have this sickness within us. And we need to be cured of this sickness because Jesus didn't come for the healthy, he came for the sick. So there's this sickness in us that needs to be cured. So the question is, what is the cure to this sickness of sin living in every single one of us? If you read on, Paul talks about that. He says, oh, what a miserable person I am. Who will free me from this life that is dominated by sin and death? Thank God. The answer is in Jesus Christ our Lord. That Jesus is the answer of the sickness of sin that is inside of every one of us. And here's the thing, I get it. You might be sitting in church and you're like, ooh, yeah, Jesus is the answer. Like you're at church, Jesus is always the answer. When in doubt, just say Jesus, right? It's like, okay, but what does that really look like? I mean, how do you break this down? Paul, what do you mean? Sure, Jesus is the answer. And yeah, so we can look at his life. What Paul is saying is in the life of Jesus and what he did for us, in the example he led for us, and what he's calling us to and wants us to be, that's where the answer is found. And Paul elaborates on this and how we can find that in Jesus in another letter that he writes to a church in Corinth. Now, this church in Corinth is in modern day Greece, and he's writing them a particular letter, and there are things happening in their culture that they see every single day. Just like there's things in our culture that we see every day. If someone was writing us a letter, there are specific things that they could reference that we would get right away. And in Corinth, in this part of Greece, there was something really popular known as the Isthmian Games, kind of the precursor to the Olympic Games. And there were athletes that lived in and around that area, in Corinth particularly. And what these athletes would do is they would train for kind of these Olympics to represent their communities, to represent themselves and their family. And they would go on like a 10-month training period to get ready for these games. And one of the most popular games was this race, and it was this long race. So these trainers would come. They'd say, we're going to train, and they'd live in and around the gymnasium for 10 months. They'd eat specific diets tailor-made for them to give them only exactly what they needed. They were so passionate about winning this race and how important it was that actually when they raced, and this is kind of weird, they would actually run naked, right? Like, weird, I know, right? We're grateful for advances in modern technology that we've got good suits now, right? But they say, I don't want anything that's on me that's going to hinder me. I don't want my clothes or a robe that I'm wearing to hinder me or keep me back. In fact, in Hebrews, it talks about this, that we throw off the things that so easily entangle. Again, this language of the Corinthians here to throw everything off. They wouldn't want anything to slow them down, so they would run naked. Another advantage, I guess, would be motivation to not be in the back of the pack, right? Like that's a view nobody wants, right? So you want to be the front of the pack running, not at the back. And this mattered to them. This mattered so much that the trainers would actually have this saying that they would shout to the athletes as they were going through training. They would say, run to win. Because second place, because the losers, they didn't get anything. And they would say, run to win, run to win. That's what matters. And look what Paul says in his letter to the Corinthians. Don't you realize that in a race, everyone runs? He's like kind of getting at, he's like, let's start someplace simple. Don't you realize that like if you ran a race, all those guys line up, every single one of them is in a race and they're going to run. I go, yeah, but only one person gets the prize? Yeah, Paul, we've seen that. Run to win. Paul is saying that thing that you feel God calling you to, that thing you want to be, that thing you want to do, when you think about where you want to be or who you want to be like and where you are right now, what Paul is saying to every single one of you is run to win. Run like it matters. Run to win. Get out there. Go after it. What's so easy is we get enamored with all the little stuff. We get enamored with all the things and the tools and the stuff and, thinking like, I don't know how they do it. And you see somebody that you want to be like, maybe it's a business person, or maybe it's a father, or maybe it's a parent, and you think, I could never do that. And you become so enamored, almost thinking it's magical, mystical, and how will I get there? And I love that there's a book called The War of Art. And in this, the author kind of addresses this and talks about it, and I love this. And he says, the sign of the amateur is over-glorification of and preoccupation with the mystery. Like, how does that happen? How does that work? The professional shuts up. She doesn't talk about it. She does her work. I love that. So that thing that you want, like sometimes we think like, maybe I want to be closer to Jesus. So maybe I just need to like pray really hard. Maybe I need to come down to the altar and sing a song really passionately, and that'll snap me into it. But the hard work is that if you want to be like Jesus, you probably got to find out what Jesus is like. So you got to read about him. You got to wake up and actually do that. You want to be closer to God, then you have to commune with him. You have to have a conversation with him. You want to be in better shape, then that means you actually have to wake up and do the work. I love this about one of our staff, and I'm going to kind of brag on him in a moment. I didn't tell him I was going to do this. But what I love about Benji is when he moved down here to be a part of our church, he came down to be our worship pastor. And he had never been a worship pastor in his life, like ever. He'd led worship here and there. He actually hadn't even been leading songs like this very, very often before he did it. And you know what he did? He didn't say like, how do you be a worship pastor? He just did the work. He stood up here and he did it. And then I love this. A few years ago, he wanted to start a podcast. So you know what Benji did? He started a podcast. He just did it. He said, I want this. I don't know how to do it, but I'm gonna figure it out and I'm gonna do it. Love it. Now he's over all creative arts for the church. Next week, if you come back next week, you'll actually see a video he made. You wanna know about all the video training he's gotten as far as video editing? Nothing. He just did the hard work to do it. And he shared with me other dreams and plans and desires that he has for his life. And you know what I think? I think he's gonna do it. Because he's someone who just gets up and does the hard work. He shuts up, doesn't talk about it, and does his work. So what is it that you wanna be? What is it that you feel God is calling you? What does he put inside of you? You wanna be that? Then do the hard work to get there. See, we wanna think it's something magical, it's something, if we just hear the right thing, you just gotta do it. And can I be a pastor just for a moment? And what I mean by that is I'm about to make some of you mad. I'm gonna step on your toes. I'm gonna do it anyway, but I'd like your permission, right? I've talked to so many people that talk about when they come to church, they feel so inspired. They get around people that love them and accept them. They feel so welcomed here. I've heard people say, man, when you said that, it felt like you were talking just to me. How do you know was this message just for me? What's going on? And I love that God does that. Because I feel so challenged. I feel so inspired. And then they don't come to church for like 3 or 4 weeks later. See, in fact, the average church attender, someone who's like a regular at church, they say now in America, comes to church once every 4 weeks. If you want to get closer to God, one tip might be to go someplace that challenges you to actually do that on a regular basis. For some of you, I talked to you, and like I said, last week's message was phenomenal. Steve talked about having words to live by in our life. I talked to so many and heard from so many people that were like, oh my gosh, it's exactly what I needed. I need to do that. That was just for me. And I've talked to people. I go, awesome. So have you done that? Done what? Actually created words to live by? Have you thought through the mind games, the lies that you tell yourself, and looked at scriptures that would counteract that? And have you gone to that website that we provided last week, and have you actually written down some sayings that you say to yourself every single day? Have you done that? Well, no, the message was killer, right? It takes work. It the end of the day, you're gonna have to do something to get there. It's not about more tools. It's not about, I got shoes now. It's about waking up and doing that. It's about when you get in a fight with your spouse, forgiving them when what you want is to get even. It's about when you want to have a closer relationship with your kids, sacrificing your own time so you can build that relationship. It's when you want to buy that thing saying, no, I'm going to save. It's actually the hard work. It's exactly what Paul said. Run to win. So my question for you today is, what are you going to do? Because you'll have some choices after today. You'll have some choices after this message. You see, church, Sunday, right here, right now, this isn't the important time. The important time is when you go out there and it's Monday and it's Tuesday and it's Wednesday and it's Thursday and it's Friday. What are you going to do on those days? What are you going to do? So 2 questions to leave you with. In a moment, the band's going to play a couple of songs. We're going to stand together and we're going to sing. But I want you to think about 2 songs. I'm going to think about 2 questions during those 2 songs. In fact, it might be good to take a picture of the screen of these 2 questions, or maybe write it down, email yourself, to find a way to really think through these questions. First, what do you want most? What do you want most? In your life, what is it? Name it. Because if you can't name it, if you can't picture it, if you can't say what it is, you're not going to get it. So what do you want most? Give yourself one thing you want most. And then, in light of that, what do you need? What do you need to do now to have what you want most? Operative word here, now. What do you need to do now to have what you want most? And then I would echo the words of Paul. Run to win. Run like it matters, because it does. See, Jesus is here. He's the cure to our sickness, that gravity that pulls us away from that. Run to win. So in light of that, can I pray for you? Let's pray. God, I thank you so much